Hey guys, tonight we're kicking things off with the ridiculous pressure of being born as an Egyptian pharaoh. Imagine coming into the world and before you can even open your eyes properly, someone's already calling you a living god. You're not just a baby, a national event, a religious symbol, and the official backup plan in case the sun forgets to rise. So before you get cozy, take a second to like the video and subscribe, only if you genuinely enjoy what I'm doing here. And leave a comment letting me know where and when you're listening. I always love knowing who's joining this sleepy journey worldwide. Now turn off the lights, switch on a soft fan if you enjoy the hum, and let's slip into tonight's story. You're just born, but there's no applause and no one calls you little cutie. Instead, a group of priests in linen robes is whispering about whether you're the true incarnation of Horus. An older man with red eyes is staring at you like you're his final exam. And somewhere, an astrologer is scribbling notes about your first cry as if it signals the nation's fate. While regular babies are wrapped in soft blankets and dozing off in their mother's arms, you're bundled in ceremonial linens, laid on a gilded crib, and watched over like you might vanish if someone blinks. Instead of being called something sweet like Kiki, you're immediately saddled with a title longer than your entire body. Heir of the throne of Upper and Lower Egypt, Light of the sun, son of Ra, and you haven't even learned to babble yet. Everyone around you is panicked, but not because you're fragile. They're panicked because you're the guarantee of the universe's future. Feeling the pressure yet? Instead of a rattle, you're given a ceremonial staff you're not allowed to chew. No lullabies for you, just the droning chants of elders and the heavy scent of incense and expectations. Can you sleep through that? Luckily, you're too young to think. Otherwise, you might have screamed, "Can I just be a normal baby?" And while other kids crawl across floors, you're kept in cool, pristine rooms, forbidden from touching dirt, because divinity mustn't mingle with dust. Sure, you have caretakers, a whole team. Their sole job, keep you alive, keep you quiet, don't let you do anything undignified, and above all, don't fall over in front of guests. One tumble, and the royal court might hold an emergency ritual to reassure the gods. Friends? Not really. If you have cousins, they're considered potential rivals to the throne. That child you're playing with today might be the high priest's son, your political enemy 10 years later. Every time you smile at someone, a nearby priest takes notes. Potential favoritism, monitor closely. And freedom? Nope. No running outside, no digging in sand, no blowing bubbles with water. Instead, you're paraded to divine presentation rituals, where you sit in your mother's lap, staring at a god statue while the room holds its breath like they're reviewing the national budget. The strangest part is, from birth, you're taught you're not like anyone else. Not because you're better, but because you're divine. You're not allowed to feel sad, angry, or throw tantrums. Because if you act too human, well, that's a crisis. And even though you can't count to 10, you've already heard the phrase, maintain cosmic order, more than any nursery rhyme. You don't know what cosmic order is, but it's your responsibility. If it rains out of season, people might blame your smile from yesterday. Then you start walking. Normal kids are encouraged to wobble. You must walk like a god. If you stumble, an uncle writes unstable. If you fall, someone might sacrifice a goat to cleanse the error of the divine child. And so it goes. Day by day, you're raised to become a symbol no one asked if you even wanted to be. No one asks if you're happy. They need you to be on time, follow the rituals, and look perfect. Even though deep down, you want to splash in mud, eat sticky rice, and yell, "I'm not a god." And this is only your third birthday. You barely have time to enjoy the thrill of standing alone without anyone holding you when your study schedule is mapped out like a military campaign. While most kids are learning nursery rhymes, you're being taught to pronounce the names of 17 different gods without mixing them up. Because if you accidentally call Sobek Seth, someone might faint, thinking you just cursed the entire religious order. Your mornings begin before the sun is even up. Not with a rooster's crow or your mother's voice, but with a priest whispering beside your bed. Today we begin with writing your name in hieroglyphs, 3 different correct ways. Ah yes, hieroglyphs. Little birds, eyes and upside-down loaves of bread, all packed with meaning. One wrong stroke turns peace into doom the village. No colored pencils for you. You use a reed pen and ink made from charcoal dust. Paper? Rough, pricey papyrus, worth its weight in gold. So if you mess up, well, don't ask why your tutor is sighing for 10 minutes without looking up. Next comes the ritual lesson. You're taught how to offer lotus flowers to the sun god at the right angle. You must kneel perfectly, raise your hands to the exact height, and bow deeply enough to show respect without knocking off your divine headdress. Bow too low and your hat falls. No one picks it up, just awkward silence and the disapproving stare of the high priest. Then it's math class, but not to count apples or budget for toys. You're learning to estimate the number of bricks needed to build a miniature pyramid. Not kidding. The tutors say, if you wish to be remembered forever, learn to stack stones properly. And there you are, age 6, tapping an abacus, calculating the perfect angle so your pyramid doesn't lean left. After that, public speaking, yes, you're trained to deliver speeches, even if your audience is just 3 priests and a yawning palace cat. You must speak like you're blessing an empire. Voice strong, words deliberate, and under no circumstances should you say something like, I'm a little sleepy. Physical education. That too. But instead of jogging or soccer, you stand perfectly still for an hour holding a wooden falcon to build divine composure. If you fidget, a general takes notes, unstable, not yet fit to command. And then there's military theory. Sounds epic, but in reality, you're stuck listening to retired generals drone about infantry formations, how to cross rivers during floods, and the art of commanding victory over the Nubians without dropping your royal pointer stick. Meanwhile, you've yet to hold a stick without accidentally flinging it into a vase. Don't forget philosophy, but not the who am I kind. No, you're studying Ma'at, the sacred cosmic balance. Sounds lofty, but for you it means this. You're responsible for the world staying in order. If the crops fail, someone might whisper, did the young Pharaoh think negatively this week? Each of your tutors is part strict teacher, undercover agent, and direct reporter to the royal court. They don't just teach you, they observe you. Did you yawn? Ask why a lesson matters. If you act too human, they calmly note it on a scroll and send it to the king. The prince shows signs of insufficient divine presence. By day's end, your head is heavy with glyphs, rituals, rules, and a long list of things you're forbidden to do. Want to play with someone? Not so easy. Want to invite your classmate for a game? Before you ask, someone reminds you he's the general's nephew. If he loses, it may insult his family. You begin to smile without smiling, nod without agreeing, and above all, you learn to stay perfectly centered, never too close, never too distant, because you never know who will hold power when you slip up just once. You start to understand that being divine isn't like the cartoons or bedtime stories. It's a string of long days where you grow up too fast, carry too much, and are never allowed to say, I'm tired. You're only 8. But you already know every god's name, how to bow correctly to Sobek, and recite ceremonial blessings you barely understand. And at night, when you lie down, the lights go out, and the priestly chants echo faintly in the distance. You sigh, unsure how much more you'll be expected to learn tomorrow. But one thing you do know, you're not allowed to stop learning, because if you mess up, the entire kingdom will gasp and hold another cleansing ritual. After years of studying rituals and hieroglyphs and learning not to drop ceremonial objects while bowing to a god, you crave something simple, a real friend. However, being the future pharaoh doesn't make friendship easy. Every child in the palace has a title, and with that title comes a position in the line of succession. The kid who's best at soccer, he's the son of the commander-in-chief. That girl who smiles at you during ritual class, she's the granddaughter of the high priest who is currently disputing temple lands with your father. Even the quiet one who doodles in the corner. She's the third queen's adopted daughter, actively lobbying to push her son closer to the throne. And you? You're the center of every one of those watchful eyes. You can't casually ask someone to play. If you spend too much time with one person, whispers start. The Crown Prince shows signs of alliance building. If you play with no one, they say, the prince is isolating, potential emotional instability. No matter what you do, someone takes note, analyzes it, and reports it to the internal court council. Every smile is a message, every glance is a diplomatic communique. So you learn a new skill. Smile just enough, nod evenly, speak in neutral phrases, and never show favoritism. One time you casually said, "Your hair looks nice today." By that afternoon, the high priest asked, "Have you begun selecting potential consorts?" As for your teachers, they're not the strict but caring kind. They're like a mix of talent judge and investigative journalist. They analyze your every reaction like decoding an ancient tablet. You glance out the window during a lesson on protective deities. They write, "Lack of focus during mention of goddess Isis. Loyalty to the Karnak temple needs review." And forget privacy. Try slipping out to look at the stars. Guards arrive instantly, like you're carrying a cursed relic. A bodyguard whispers, "Your Majesty must not stray." No one believes you just wanted fresh air. Even eating is scrutinized. Eat too little, and they say you're depressed. Overeat, someone notes, signs of energy accumulation, possibly preparing for a significant ceremony. You eat roasted yams 2 days in a row, and theologians start debating whether it holds religious significance. Even games aren't safe. One time you played ring toss with a group of noble children. You won. Everyone laughed. A few hours later, a report hit your father's desk. The prince won 3 rounds, noteworthy dominance, potential psychological disruption among allied families. So you learn not to win too hard. When your body starts to change, your voice deepens, and you find yourself pretending not to notice the girls in ritual class. That's when the royal advisors appear, carrying a very long, very official scroll and a suspiciously cheerful smile. "Your Highness, congratulations," one begins. "You've reached the appropriate age to get married." You frown. "To whom?" They reply, completely unfazed. "Your cousin, or your sister, or your aunt, or if we're lucky, just a distant relative, as long as the royal bloodline remains pure." You try very hard not to spit out your pomegranate juice. They're not joking. They want you to marry someone you used to share sticky rice cakes with as a toddler. And the strange thing is, no one finds this odd. On the contrary, they see it essential to maintain the divine legitimacy of the throne. In the palace, marrying your sister isn't scandalous, it's tradition. You attempt to reason, if the gods are all powerful, why do they need such complicated marriage plans? No one answers. They stare at you like you've insulted the entire religious structure of Egypt. And so you're swept into a royal bride selection process where you have no real say. Today it's a formal visit with your uncle's daughter. Tomorrow is a tea party with your cousin who pulled your hair last year. Each meeting is elaborately staged, meticulously documented, and ends with a line like, "Candidate number 2 has an 89% genetic compatibility. Please consider." No one asks if you like her. No one cares that maybe, just maybe, you want to get to know someone first. Or that you'd prefer to marry someone outside your immediate bloodline, just in case your future children might appreciate having a complete set of properly placed limbs. Then one fine day, fine according to the ceremonial calendar, not your emotional readiness, is scheduled for the wedding. Before you can protest, the entire court is already busy preparing. The priests are giddy, the ministers are thrilled. The astrologers claim the moon will be unusually bright, a sign of divine approval. And you're just thinking, I haven't even finished the course on ceremonial offerings. And now I have to learn how to be a husband. From then on, every day is rehearsal. You learn to stand next to your bride in a way that conveys strength without overshadowing. You practice holding hands while maintaining a sacred distance. And you rehearse how not to look panicked entirely as hundreds of guests stare at you like you're the main event in a national ritual, which you are. The wedding day arrives. You wear an outfit heavier than a soldier's armor, with a crown on your head and the weight of eternity in your hands. The bride enters. someone you once argued with over who got the last date fruit at a banquet. You exchange glances, barely breathing, because behind you stands an entire dynasty banking on this union. The ceremony begins. There's incense, ancient chants, gentle cymbals, and drums beating steadily like the heart of someone signing a 30-year contract without reading the fine print. Then comes the banquet. Guests eat, dance, and toast to your eternal happiness. You, meanwhile, are escorted to the wedding chamber. There's no romance, no privacy, just a massive somber room and a papyrus scroll titled "Steps for Fulfilling Your Royal Duties." You sit, looking into the eyes of your new wife, who's still trying to untangle a gold necklace 3 times heavier than necessary, and both of you sigh. And in that moment, you understand something. A pharaoh's marriage isn't about love, it's a duty. Just another scene in the political play you've been acting in since the day you were born. No one asked if you were ready. You have to do it. The right way, at the right time. With the right person, as long as they're related. And as you lie down, trying to sleep in a room decorated with hundreds of painted eyes meant to watch over divine blessings, you find yourself thinking, maybe being a farmer wouldn't be so bad. At least they get to choose who they love. After the wedding, you think you'll get a few days off. Think again. The moment the vows are exchanged, it's time for the coronation. And a coronation in ancient Egypt isn't like graduation day. It's more like being permanently installed as the official representative of everything the sun touches. That morning, you wake up before dawn. Not out of nervous excitement, but because ceremonial drums start pounding at 4 a.m., the entire palace is ablaze with torchlight. You're escorted to the dressing chamber, and that's where the suffering begins. First comes the pure white linen robe, woven from the finest fabric, which doesn't absorb sweat. Then the leopard skin sash, a symbol of strength and divine connection. And an excellent way to itch from your hips to your neck. Next is the gold breastplate, embossed with falcons, sacred serpents, and the rising sun. It's heavier than the emotional weight of being told to marry your sister. And finally, the crown. It is not just a headpiece, but an architectural project in its own right, made from fabric, metal, and sometimes spring-loaded coils to keep the sacred Uraeus snake upright on your forehead. You bow your head slightly and nearly topple over from the weight. Next comes the fake beard. Yes, no worries if your real one hasn't grown in yet. A stiff, braided fiber beard is waxed to your chin with hot beeswax. You wear it all day. You do not remove it. If it itches, you suffer, like a true god would. You're led outside, standing before thousands of priests, nobles, soldiers, commoners, all gathered to witness you transform from human to eternal symbol of the nation. You're no longer the emperor's son. You are the emperor, the pharaoh, the living embodiment of Horus. And to prove that, you must stand perfectly still, unblinking, through a 2-hour ceremony while someone recites every title you now hold. Heir of Ra, Incarnation of Ma'at, Lord of the 2 lands, Master of the 4 winds, Protector of the Nile. It continues until you silently plead to the gods, "Please, just let me sit for a minute." When the chanting ends, they hand you your mission. Not with a speech, but with symbols, the crook, the flail, the serpent bracelet. Each one is heavy, cold, and rigid. And you must hold them all at once, strike a commanding pose, and, above all, don't drop anything. Then comes the temple procession. You ride a ceremonial litter, crown on your head, forced smile on your lips, waving like you were born for this. You're thinking, sweat is running into my eyes. Anyone gonna wipe that? No one does, because you're a god, and gods don't blink for sweat. People cheer, some cry, some kneel, some are just here for the free pastries, but they all look at you like you embody universal order. And you're just trying not to trip on the temple steps as you approach the statue of the lion-headed god and perform the final blessing by tapping your staff gently to the ground and declaring 3 times, "I am ready." Of course, you're not ready. You just memorized the lines. When it's finally over, you're allowed to retreat to the palace. When the door closes behind you, you collapse into the nearest chair. An attendant rushes in. "Your Majesty, would you like to attend your coronation feast?" You shake your head, hands fumbling to remove the crown, lips cracked, neck sore from holding your head upright for 6 straight hours. You whisper, "Just bring me water," and 5 minutes where no one calls me divine. In the silence of your chamber, it's just you now. Rumpled linen, a limp fake beard from the heat, and legs that feel like marble pillars. You're officially the most powerful person in Egypt, and officially someone who's no longer allowed just to be themselves. Once the crown was placed on your head, it didn't take long for you to discover a rather inconvenient truth. Being Pharaoh wasn't just about ruling, it was also about being an unwilling fashion icon. And not the fashion where you dress to impress on camera, but the kind where you dress correctly so the entire cosmos keeps functioning. Sounds ridiculous? Maybe. But in ancient Egypt, that was the reality. Each morning, you weren't allowed to choose your clothes. An official group, known as the ceremonial garment priests, was responsible for curating your wardrobe. And they didn't ask, "What would your Majesty like to wear today?" They asked, "What divine energy must be embodied this morning?" You so much as yawn, and they're already debating what fabric to use, what color represents cosmic harmony, which god should be embroidered across your chest, and whether or not you need snake-themed accessories. Sometimes you wonder, am I just a divine coat hanger with a pulse? Your daily outfit typically included a perfectly pleated white linen kilt folded at sacred angles. Over that came a heavy gold belt, because of course it was. And since you couldn't go out in just a kilt, a ceremonial cloak was draped over your shoulders, often trailing to your heels, embroidered with images of rising suns, wide-winged falcons, or, most confusingly, your face rendered in abstract divine geometry. You once complained, "It's a bit hot today." To which they solemnly replied, "Divinity does not concern itself with temperature, Your Majesty." Fine, you endure it. But when it comes to the footwear, specifically the sandals, that's where you hit your limit. Pharaoh's sandals were not made for walking, they were designed to radiate power. Often crafted from woven papyrus, inlaid with gemstones, and embroidered with sacred symbols, they offered no padding, shock absorption, or comfort. After 10 steps, you're ready to cry, but since you're mid-procession honoring the sun god, you must keep smiling, stride with majesty, and silently beg not to trip in front of the statue of Anubis. Even color is a landmine. Wearing turquoise? Great. It symbolizes rebirth, but if someone thinks it looks more like faded green, they might interpret it as a subtle omen of sorrow. Which of course means 3 days of emergency, misfortune cleansing rituals. All because of your undertone. You once tried wearing a plain, undecorated tunic to relax. Within minutes, a royal attendant leaned in and whispered, "Your Majesty, have the gods delivered troubling dreams? Why do you appear monochromatic today?" You never made that mistake again. And that was just the daily wear. Each ritual required its unique outfit. Rain invocation ceremony, linen robes embroidered with waves, a frog-shaped headdress. Harvest blessing, golden stripes and grain-patterned bangles. Isis's birthday, all white with a scarab necklace and barefoot. Why barefoot? No one knows. It's simply what's always been done. Sometimes you wonder, if you wore a simple, comfy tunic without sun gods or divine snakes on it, would the world collapse? But you don't test it. Because one time, when you were 17, you snuck into the palace garden wearing a short kilt. Nothing ceremonial. You just wanted to sunbathe and eat a fig in peace. But before you could sit down, a group of frantic priests rushed in. The divine embodiment is underdressed. The balance of the universe may be at risk. After that, you had to participate in a 3-day explanatory ritual. Yes, 3 days, to prove that a short kilt wasn't a sign of cosmic instability. From then on, you never left your chambers unless you were dressed fully, reverently, divinely. And from then on, you understood. To be Pharaoh wasn't just about being wise, strong, or just. It also meant being a master of sacred styling, coordinating with the gods, dressing seasonally appropriately, and never wearing the wrong sandals on a full moon. You think being Pharaoh means commanding everything. Well, you're not wrong. But it also means getting blamed for everything, even when it rains on the wrong day. You sit on the throne, called Lord of the Two Lands, incarnation of Ra, balancer of the universe. But in practice, you're more like a lightning rod for everything that goes wrong in an Egyptian's life. One year, the Nile flooded a bit higher than usual. It is not a catastrophe. It is just inconvenient for planting rice. Farmers complained, ministers worried, and suddenly all eyes turned to you. Has Pharaoh been having improper thoughts? A priest whispered. Perhaps His Majesty skipped the morning prayer to Sobek. You tried to explain, I just had a light cough that day, couldn't make it to the main temple. But no one listened. They immediately held a purification of the waters ceremony and suggested you fast for 3 days to cleanse divine energy. Another time, a prolonged drought hit. Crops withered. Someone murmured, did Pharaoh wear the wrong-colored robe during the last festival? And so you had to perform a cosmic energy recalibration ritual, which meant putting on a sunstone necklace and standing in silence for 3 hours under the blazing sun. Even the most minor things didn't escape scrutiny. One day, someone slipped on the temple steps. Rumors spread. It's an omen. Perhaps Pharaoh's soul needs recentering. The worst was when you sneezed during a sacred ritual. Not a loud, dramatic sneeze, just a soft little achoo. But a priest immediately gasped. Sneezing during divine hour is a sign of spiritual misalignment. You had to stand still while they sprinkled holy water over your head, like you were a cat dragged into a surprise sacrifice. There was no such thing as bad weather, no concept of coincidence. Everything from a snake in the grain store to someone getting too many mosquito bites could somehow be interpreted as Pharaoh's fault. You began living in a state of constant hyper-awareness. Each morning, you'd check for mist, wind direction, and whether the courtyard wheat leaned more than 45 degrees. If something looked off, you'd immediately wonder, did I forget something yesterday? The truth was, being Pharaoh meant you weren't just ruler of the kingdom. You were also the spiritual scapegoat for the entire cosmos. No issue was too small. Feeling a little under the weather? That's a sign your divine energy is weakening. I ate too many grapes and got a stomachache. Possibly a curse caused by an incomplete ritual. Did you dream of a cat chasing a mouse? Better summon the astrologers for a complete cosmic vision interpretation. Even your dreams weren't yours anymore. Once, you dreamed you were swimming in the Nile and suddenly sprouted wings. You mentioned it as a joke. 2 days later, the entire ceremonial council convened to analyze it. Their verdict: the pharaoh is transitioning from water energy to air energy. A balancing rite is required. You were so exhausted you just wanted to sigh, but feared breathing incorrectly would lead someone to whisper, his breath today feels unstable. Should we offer more camphor incense? And when you stepped outside to take a short walk in the garden, you caught a group of nobles watching you, whispering, he's leaning slightly left as he walks. Could be a sign of axis imbalance. You couldn't believe it. But then you asked yourself, am I leaning left? From that day on, you practiced walking straighter, seriously. You weren't just the ruler of Egypt. You were the explanation for why anything happened. If something went well, people thanked the gods. If anything went wrong, they asked what you did. You breathed evenly, you spoke gently, you performed every ritual flawlessly. But when you lay down at night, you couldn't help but laugh. If a fish gets stuck on a sandbank tomorrow, I'll probably have to answer for that too. At the age when all you want is to go spearfishing or lie by the river listening to the breeze, you're forced to do something much harder. Pretend to be immortal. As Pharaoh, you're not allowed to get sick. Not even a slight grimace from a headache. In ancient Egypt, pharaohs were believed to be the living embodiment of the gods, and gods don't cough from morning mist or get stomachaches from unwashed grapes. So when you got a sore throat for the first time, you tried to power through it, drank some water and smiled a little more. But your voice was raspy, and immediately a court official fretted, could it be that the cosmic voice is being disrupted? Before you could brush it off, the priests arrived. 3 amulets, 2 goblets of beetle wing tea, and a 15-minute prayer in hand. Each time you sneezed, at least 5 people prostrated themselves, begging Horus to forgive them for allowing his avatar to catch a breeze. It didn't stop there. From that day on, you were taken daily to the purification chamber. You had to soak your feet in warm salt water, inhale sacred tree incense, and lie still while the priests whispered spells to seal divine energy from leaking through your jaw pores. You tried saying, "I'm just sore because I didn't sleep well." They looked at you like you had declared the sun wouldn't rise tomorrow. And don't expect a doctor to be like ordinary people. There are no doctors, only priests. They don't ask, "Where does it hurt?" They ask, "Have you recently experienced an imbalanced dream? Got a headache?" That's due to unreleased negative wind in the spirit mind. Remedy: mugwort tea, belly massage with scented oils, and 47 minutes of ritual chanting. Then came the time you had a high fever, probably from too much honey. You fainted mid-ceremony. When you woke up, you weren't in bed. You were lying in the center of a temple, encircled by salt, surrounded by 8 priests, chanting loudly. They didn't call it fainting. They said, "Pharaoh is undergoing a temporary transformation into the divine realm." Not illness, a sacred transition. You didn't know whether to feel honored or horrified. From then on, every day became a performance. Even if your eyes stung, your body ached, and your steps faltered, you had to keep your back straight, your voice steady, and your gaze radiant with the light of Ra. One time you accidentally coughed in front of an audience. The room fell silent. A maid dropped her vase in shock. An elderly official mumbled, "Could this be a sign of the 3rd energy cycle ending?" You forced a smile and muttered, "Just dust." The next day, dust was banned from the palace. Hallways were swept non-stop. Servants had to walk barefoot to reduce disturbances. And you? You still had to smile as if the cough never happened. And it wasn't just sickness. You weren't even allowed to age. When the first lines appeared at the corners of your eyes, the priests immediately launched the royal energy rejuvenation ritual. You were smeared with Nile clay masks, steamed with lotus incense, and placed on a light-only diet for 3 days. That meant golden fruits and water that had been left in the sun. You once looked into the mirror, sighed, and said, "I'm getting older." No one replied. But the next morning, every mirror in the palace was replaced with foggy, burnished bronze. The reason? The divine must not perceive the boundaries of their own form. From then on, you never saw your face again. You didn't know if your hair had grayed or your eyes had sunken. But every day, you had to step out into the world as a radiant sunrise, even when you only wanted to lie down and press a warm cloth to your forehead. And at the end of the day, when you collapse into bed, exhausted beyond belief, and exhale a long, quiet sigh, you find yourself wishing for a straightforward thing. That one day, you could sneeze, loud and proud, without anyone chanting a blessing over your soul. Do you know what the strangest thing about being a pharaoh is? It's not the crown that weighs twice as much as your head. It's not even the mandatory daily diet of dried dates to strengthen divine essence. You're not allowed to talk like a normal person, because to everyone else, you're not a king or a leader. You're the living embodiment of a god. So even if you want to say something simple like, "Sorry, I'm a little tired today," someone will record it as, "The Lord has sent a message of sorrow to all of Egypt." And that's how you learn the art of coded speech. You're not allowed to sigh. You can't ask, "Why is that fan so noisy?" Instead, you must say, "It seems the wind is unbalanced in the divine realm today." One time, a court official came to request a raise. You couldn't just say, "There's no budget." You had to say, "The blessings of Ra are still accumulating. We must wait for the energy to fully mature." He understood. Ah, that's a no. Once you tried making small talk with a handmaiden, just a polite question about her health. The next day, rumors spread. The pharaoh is choosing a new consort. She may be elevated to royal concubine. When in truth you'd asked, "Is your foot still swollen from yesterday?" From that day forward, you stopped checking in on anyone. Worse are the political meetings. Officials come in, bow to the floor, avoid your gaze, and begin presenting national issues. Failed crops, delayed temple construction, and southern villagers complaining about mosquitoes. You sit there, trying not to doze off, but also unable to look tired. Because if you drift for even a second, someone will worry that the gods are displeased with this land. You once tried being direct. If you don't plant in the right season, the crops won't grow. The room fell silent, as if all the air had been sucked out. An elder minister bowed deeply. Your servant accepts blame for troubling the heart of Ra. You wanted to say, it's not about blame, it's just basic logic. But you know no one wants logic from a god. They want divine signals. So you learn to speak in riddles. Not because you enjoy it, but because it's the only way to avoid triggering a kingdom-wide spiritual crisis. You say, when the light has not yet arrived, let the grain remain beneath the soil. Translation, don't plant out of season. You say, if the waters do not rise, let us ask if we've forgotten our New Year's vows. Translation, dig more irrigation canals. To survive the meeting, you turn every basic instruction into a metaphor that sounds like prophecy. Even when you're in pain, say a stomachache from unfiltered juice, you can't grimace or groan. Instead, you must say, the divine essence is undergoing a phase of purification. And then the priests arrive, offering to perform a ritual release of inner energy. You shake your head, all you want is some ginger tea. But in ancient Egypt, there was no such thing. Only root brews that taste like you kissed a bronze statue. And the funniest part? When you want to make small talk. One afternoon, you sit beside your senior advisor and casually ask, don't you think it's unusually cloudy today? He trembles, then kneels. Is this a celestial cue for national strategy, my lord? You sigh and think, I was just talking about the weather. You can't banter, you can't joke, you can't misspeak. Because if you accidentally say the wrong god's name, even just a slip of the tongue, by the next day, all of Thebes will be performing a mass apology ritual. You live like an actor on a stage, every word scrutinized. And the audience truly believes that every sound you utter carries a message from the heavens. But you? You want for once to sit cross-legged on the floor, hug your knees and say, man, it's really hot today. As Pharaoh, you'd think you'd get to eat well at the very least, right? Well, yes and no. Sure, your banquet table stretches 10 meters long, overflowing with exquisitely prepared dishes, roast goose, honey cakes, rare fruits imported from Nubia. But whether you get to eat them is another story entirely. First of all, you don't eat when you're hungry. You eat when the ceremonial hour arrives. Some mornings, you wake up at 4 a.m. for the sunrise rite, circle the temple 4 times, stand under the blazing sun, and receive 3 diplomatic envoys. When your stomach is practically shouting, a priest turns to you and says, the blessed hour for nourishment will begin in 23 drumbeats, which means wait another hour. When you finally reach the table, don't even think about sitting down and grabbing a juicy piece of goose. First, you must wash your hands with water drawn from the exact middle of the Nile, sprinkled with lotus petals, while reciting a chant giving thanks to the bounty of the Mother Earth. That takes 10 minutes. Then comes the tasting, but not by you. A dedicated food servant samples every dish first, just in case someone decided to poison you with, say, pomegranate jam. Oh, and don't forget the food advisor. Yes, a real job, who stands beside you explaining each dish in excruciating detail. This dish uses barley harvested under a full moon, boiled in triple purified water, then roasted over sandalwood fire. You nod while your insides scream, I get it, just let me eat. Then finally, you're allowed to eat with your hands, since chopsticks weren't a thing in Egypt. But even then, you must follow strict ceremonial order. You cannot eat black-colored food before yellow-colored food. You may not drink until after you've eaten the bread. And you absolutely may not take the last bite. It's reserved for the gods. The meal lasts longer than a council meeting, and you're expected to eat slowly, gracefully, as if performing for all of Egypt. One day, you try grabbing a large bite because you're starving. Immediately, an advisor gasps, "Your Majesty, please maintain the equilibrium of your divine image." You stare at your piece of goose, put it down, and silently curse the divine image your empty stomach is forced to uphold. Worst of all are the international banquets. When foreign dignitaries visit, you don't just eat. You must embody divine poise through dining. Once, an envoy from Hatti presents you with roasted pumpkin seeds, a delicacy from his homeland. You take a bite. It tastes like crunchy gravel. But you nod and declare, "Ah, a perfect fusion of desert wind and earth's hidden spirit." Everyone applauds. You swallow your tears. Then you must laugh at the correct times. For example, when someone raises a cup and proclaims, "To peace between our two lands," you must lift yours, even if you haven't sipped yet, and reply, "To the resonance of twin moons." It sounds majestic, but even you don't know what it means. And when someone says, "The Pharaoh truly knows how to dine with elegance," it doesn't mean you enjoyed your meal. It means you pulled off the performance. Sometimes you wish for a straightforward meal, a hot bowl of porridge, a fresh date, a warm slice of bread. No chants, no rituals, just food. But even that is labeled unworthy of divine presence. Once, you sneaked out to the back courtyard and shared a boiled yam with the palace guards. They laughed, you laughed, and for a moment you felt human. But the next morning, an official record appeared. Last night, the Pharaoh conducted a sacred inspection of the troops, partaking in the holy rite of communal bread. You wanted to say, "I just ate a potato," but decided against it, because deep down you understood. In everyone's eyes, you're never allowed to be just someone hungry. Being Pharaoh comes with one elementary truth. You cannot just quietly appear anywhere. Walk down a hallway. Trumpets. Step into the garden for some fresh air. More trumpets. Trip on a loose tile. Probably also trumpets. And cymbals. And ceremonial chants. There is no such thing as a casual stroll. That idea does not exist. One afternoon, you just wanted to wander around the palace courtyard to clear your mind after a long day of meetings. You tiptoed out. But before reaching the second corner, the hornblowers spotted you. They sprang into action, tugged on every ceremonial bell rope, and launched into the song, "Hymn of the Divine Morning Light," despite it being nearly sunset. You stood there, frozen like a stone pillar, trying to smile while 3 musicians clapped rhythms, 6 others waved peacock feather fans, and a group of children danced in a choreographed circle around you. All you wanted was a walk. From then on, every time you left your room, an entire announcement crew went into motion. Someone ran ahead to scatter flower petals. Guards stood at attention like statues. Temple priests waited at every corner to shout your titles whenever you changed direction. The Pharaoh moves eastward, toward the rising sun god. The Pharaoh turns left, just as divine rivers shift course. You were looking for the toilet. And no, you couldn't just use the side door, not out of pride, but because of ritual protocol. The divine never passes through narrow ways, meaning you were required to take the grand hall, the main entrance, past every ceremonial checkpoint, even when suffering from stomach cramps. One time you ate slightly sour grapes during the harvest Thanksgiving. Your belly instantly began to rebel. You quietly stood up, subtly gesturing to leave, hoping to make a quick escape to your private chambers. You got 3 steps in, then the procession began. Drums rolled. A miniature orchestra emerged from who knows where. A high priest cried, "The Pharaoh embarks on a sacred inward journey." You wanted to scream, "No, I just need a chamber pot." But of course, you couldn't scream. The divine does not yell, so you walked as quickly as dignity allowed, maintaining the graceful yet commanding stride described in the ceremonial manual. When you finally arrived, you exhaled with relief. A task that should have taken 30 seconds had just stolen 15 minutes of your life. And the worst part, you are never, ever alone. Even when you requested a moment of privacy, there were always at least 2 eunuchs standing outside, one with a fan, one with a ceremonial bell, just in case you needed divine assistance mid-pee. Because everyone believed the gods are never truly alone. Once you did try to escape. You faked being tired and went to bed early, waited until everyone left, threw on a black cloak, and slipped out the back through the supply room. You weren't trying to run away. Just a quiet moment by the river, to see the moon, to feel the wind, to be human. You made it halfway when a guard spotted you. He dropped to his knees and screamed, "The Pharaoh has transcended. His spirit walks among the living." Chaos followed. Torches lit up the palace. They thought you'd been abducted by a rival spirit. You had to limp back in awkwardly while the crowd chanted, "The Pharaoh has returned." Balance is restored. After that, you gave up sneaking out. Not because of fear, just exhaustion. You live in a world where every step is a ceremony, every movement is an omen, and even going to the bathroom requires at least 3 drum beats to clear the path. As Pharaoh, you'd think that after a day full of ceremonies, chanting, theatrical meals, and a parade of drums following your every step, at the very least, you'd be allowed a peaceful night's sleep. But no, you're Pharaoh. And sleep isn't for resting. It's for communicating with the gods. Before you're allowed to lie down each evening, you must go through the soul-guiding ritual. It starts with lotus oil being rubbed into your temples. Sounds relaxing, but this oil is so pungent you have to fight the urge to sneeze. A priest stands by your bed, fanning you with an ostrich feather fan in the direction of the breeze of Horus. And if the wind outside changes, he has to start over. Then comes the recitation of the hymn to unlock the dream gate, 108 verses, recited in a rhythmic, drowsy drone for about 30 minutes. You asked if it could be shortened, but they insisted, without the full recitation, your soul won't find the way into dreams. You're not sure your soul likes poetry, but your eyelids droop around verse 17. After the chant, you're laid on a special bed, not too soft, not too firm, made of rosewood and woven cords, carved with the figure of Anubis cradling your back. You must lie in the correct position, left arm straight, right hand gently on your belly, legs closed, face angled northeast, toward the rising sun. Once, you fell asleep before adjusting yourself properly. By morning, you were found facing west. The entire palace panicked. They feared you were unconsciously seeking the realm of the dead. You woke to 3 cold towels on your head and an ongoing ritual of soul re-summoning around your bed all morning. You wanted to say, "I just rolled over in my sleep." But no one believed that the living embodiment of a god could sleep the wrong way. Worse still, each morning you must report your dreams. Not just for fun, for national divination. You once dreamt of being chased by a cat, completely normal, you thought. But upon telling it, 3 dream interpreters scribbled furiously while one murmured, "A cat symbolizes Bastet. A chase means awakening. Perhaps the goddess is upset with an incomplete ritual." You ended up hosting a special ceremony to appease the cat goddess, even though deep down you suspected it was just late-night indigestion. Another time, you dreamt of falling into a well. Before you could explain, the court was buzzing. It may be a warning about the nation's subconscious depths. You had to issue a royal decree ordering all temple wells in the south to be remeasured. You just nodded because resisting is pointless. Eventually, you learned to edit your dreams. When you dreamed about arguing with your sister, who's also your queen and maybe a cousin, you reported, "I dreamt of conversing with the goddess Isis. She seemed to be imparting deep wisdom." They all nodded solemnly. You exhaled. You even got out of some morning meetings thanks to your dream rebranding skills. For instance, when a dream involved being pecked on the head by a pigeon, you declared, "The divine warns of jealousy within the court." The council postponed the day's schedule to cleanse envious energies. You sat in your room, sipping date nectar, enjoying a rare moment of peace. But still, sleep was never simple again. Each night as you lay down, you thought, "Okay, let's dream something harmless tonight. No elephants, no mice, and please, no sister." You lay there, eyes wide open, surrounded by incense, golden lamplight, distant chanting echoing softly through the halls, and a priest at your bedside holding a scroll titled Dream Log of the Divine Realm. You want to say, "Can I just have one normal dream?" But you know, as Pharaoh, you don't even own your sleep. As Pharaoh, you are the ruler of Egypt, the living embodiment of Ra, the master of the Nile, the desert, and endless political marriages longer than the book of rituals. And because of that, you are rarely allowed to love anyone truly. When you hit puberty, a council stood by your bed holding a scroll of princesses from neighboring lands. This one is from Nubia, both beautiful and wise. That one is the daughter of the high priest of Memphis. She could help secure a valuable alliance. You stare at the list, nearly as long as a linen towel, unsure whether to laugh or cry. You only learned to shave 2 weeks ago. When you finally marry one of those princesses, after a blur of vows, processions, rituals, and over 400 ceremonial drums, you find out you're not allowed to be alone with your wife. At least not for the first 3 weeks, because the marriage energy must first align with the universe. During this time, you are instructed to sit facing each other daily, read aloud from the Book of Soul Harmony, listen to temple music, and sip lotus tea from a shared cup. Let's talk about cats or the weather. But no, every soul connection session is monitored by a priest serving as an emotional supervisor. If you casually ask, "Do you like grilled fish?" the priest immediately cuts in, "Please return to the theme of divine radiance in matrimony." After 3 weeks, you're finally officially permitted to be together. But don't get excited. That too must follow a strict ritual. It starts with the ceremony of spirit union. There is music, there is chanting, there are petals scattered on the bed, and 2 priests stand outside separate chambers, whispering blessings for cosmic resonance. You just wanted a regular evening like any other married couple, but nothing is ever regular when you're Pharaoh. Even worse, if your wife conceives too early or too late, according to their divine astrological calendar, you're summoned for a review of your spiritual alignment. One year, they made you perform a ritual called Activation of Royal Vitality, which involved standing in a date palm grove, drinking pomegranate juice, and singing. Don't ask what song. You don't remember. Just 8 priests shaking bells while you mumbled something about Seth blessing us with bountiful life. And love, if you truly love someone, becomes even more complicated. Because love isn't listed in any political treaty, once you fell for a harpist who played by the lake every morning. Bright eyes, gentle hands, never asking if you were a king or just a man who liked dried fish. You thought, maybe this is the first time I feel truly myself. You tried to speak to her, just a few friendly words. The next day, she was reassigned to the Lower Nile. Official reason: the royal spirit must remain undisturbed. You didn't cry. But that night, you dreamt of walking alone through the desert. No music, no voices, just wind, sand, and a quiet sigh. The next morning, the court astrologer told you, "This is a sign of spiritual transition. You must refocus on your divine purpose." And you just wanted an everyday conversation, one that wouldn't be recorded in sacred ink. You grow used to treating emotions like rituals. No love poems, no secret letters. Every tender feeling must be translated into cosmic terms. Heartbeat tremors become resonant frequencies of divine essence. You want to say, "I miss you," but instead you say, "The palace grows quiet without the sound of her harp." That's enough for someone to whisper, "Ah, Pharaoh is daydreaming again." But it's all right. You learn to remember silently. And at night, lying in your grand cedarwood bed, beneath layers of embroidered silk, listening to the wind outside, you quietly think about the gaze of a girl who's no longer there. No ritual needed, just a little silence. You want to say, "I miss you," but instead you say, "The palace grows quiet without the sound of her harp." That's enough for someone to whisper, "Ah, Pharaoh is daydreaming again." But it's all right. You learn to remember silently. And at night, lying in your grand cedarwood bed, beneath layers of embroidered silk, listening to the wind outside, you quietly think about the gaze of a girl who's no longer there. No ritual needed, just a little silence. If you think being Pharaoh means at least you get to bathe in fragrant water and relax every day, well, you'd be half right. Yes, you do bathe. But relax? Not. First of all, you're not allowed to bathe alone. There's an entire team assigned to this sacred duty. One person heats the water, another tests the temperature, one stirs in the oils, another scatters flower petals, and yet another checks the wind direction, because even a breeze in the wrong direction might disrupt the open divine flow. Bathing is a religious event. Every time you want to rinse off some dust, they treat it as the sacred ritual of purifying the divine vessel. And this must occur only at auspicious hours, on the correct days, and only with water drawn from the central branch of the Nile, precisely when the sun touches the horizon. Not just any water will do, it must be energetically cleansed, steeped with lotus petals, gemstones, and a splash of goat's milk. One day you asked, "Can I soak in cool water today?" It's sweltering, and the priests panicked. Impossible. Cool water may weaken the divine yang energy of His Majesty. You fell silent, dipped your feet into a warm bath that smelled like incense and yogurt, and told yourself, "At least it's fragrant." But even that wasn't as soothing as it sounds. You had to sit in the exact divine equilibrium posture, back straight, eyes northward. There was soft music, chanting, and someone announcing the time of each phase. "This is minute 32. Please lower your right shoulder slightly." You couldn't scrub your own back. That's considered sacred work, entrusted to two attendants who gently rub your skin using coiled palm leaves and mineral salts in slow spiral patterns. One day you joked, "You can scrub a bit harder, don't worry." One attendant nearly burst into tears. "I can't. If I touch the sacred skin of Pharaoh too firmly, I'll be cursed." So you sat quietly, enduring gentle palm fronds that itched, but never quite scratched. After bathing, you weren't allowed to towel off. You had to stand in a steam chamber for 7 minutes so that earthly energy could evaporate. Then you were fanned with ostrich feathers while they sang the Song of the Nile, letting its spiritual vibrations absorb your skin. Still not done. Next came the oiling, but not just one oil, 7 different oils, each for a different body part. Lotus oil for your forehead, resin oil for your shoulders, amber oil for your wrists, herbal oil for your feet. One attendant would announce each one while applying it. "This is oil from the lower Egyptian agar wood tree, harvested during the rainy season of the 23rd year of Sobek." By the time they got halfway through, you were already dozing off, your neck half greased with scented balm. Then came the silk robe, infused with floral fragrance, which was changed daily. Not because you asked for it, but because protocol demanded that any garment infused with divine essence be replaced to maintain the balance of the spiritual climate around you. Once you asked, "What if I bathe twice a day?" The priests were stunned. One finally whispered, "Unthinkable." The body needs 24 hours to restore its divine energies after a ritual cleansing. You gave a tired laugh. On a particularly hot day, you quietly dipped your fingers into a bowl of ice water when no one was watching, just a brief stolen moment, like a secret gift to yourself. Because amidst all the rituals, incantations, protocols, and sacred bindings, you are still a person. You want to feel clean. You want to feel cool. And sometimes, you want a 5-minute silent shower, but no one ever bathes quickly when they are Pharaoh. If you imagine being Pharaoh means getting a whole month off each year for festivals, lounging beneath date palms, sipping chilled pomegranate juice, watching dances and smiling politely as someone offers you a warm pastry, well, you're not entirely wrong. There are pastries, there are dances, there are date palms. But relaxation, that's another story. Because Pharaoh's time off is a long parade of rituals that begin at dawn and don't end until you're ready to crawl under your throne like a schoolboy trying to skip class. Take, for example, the Festival of the Inundation. It's a grand 7-day celebration to thank the god of the Nile for not letting the entire kingdom dry up like yesterday's forgotten bread. And you, of course, are the centerpiece of it all. You're woken before the sun rises, dressed in a ceremonial robe embroidered with over 300 divine symbols in gold thread, and adorned with a necklace as heavy as a full-grown cat. Then you're hoisted onto a royal litter to begin the day's procession. Sitting on the litter may look majestic, but no shock absorbers exist. On a path full of pebbles, you must smile, wave, and maintain the aura of Ra's light greeting his people. Every time you nearly topple over, the crowd erupts with joy. The Pharaoh is moving with the rhythm of the Nile, and you want to shout, "No, I just slipped." After the procession comes the standing part. You must stand motionless for 2 hours in the sun, holding a scepter, while priests chant ancient hymns with lyrics that challenge both memory and sanity. O water god, flowing god, god that spreads like rain. You're unsure if you're hearing a prayer or a weather forecast. Then comes the water offering. Pharaoh scoops sacred Nile water from a golden vessel and pours it onto the year's first field. Cheers erupt, priests blast trumpets, children toss flowers. And you? You must bend at exactly 3 geometric points at the correct angle to show the internal balance of the nation's spirit. As you straighten back up, your spine lets out a quiet crack. No one hears it. But you do. That's your back protesting divine protocol. You think it's over? Not quite. Evening brings the grand banquet. A table stretches like the Nile's banks, lined with river fish, foreign sweets, and honey from the southern provinces. But you don't get to dig in just yet. First, the priests read the hymn of the waters, the mothers, and the motherland. A 365-verse epic. 1 verse for every day of the year. By verse 143, you're barely listening and daydreaming about being a blade of grass. When the meal ends, before your food even settles, you must perform a sacred dance. Arms flowing, steps delicate, face aglow with joy that's divine but not too human, and celebratory but not irreverent. You dance, your back aches, your sandals pinch, your jaw is sore from smiling. The crowd looks at you beaming, thinking you're savoring every second. In truth, you're counting. It's only day 2. 5 more to go. Every festival is like this. The Moon Festival, the Harvest Festival, the Flower Offering, the changing seasons, the rebirth of the gods. Each comes with its own outfit, rituals, musical instruments, and a smile you must wear like ceremonial armor. Eventually you develop a strange fear, a fear of celebration, because in this life a joyful day never means restful. Once you asked a priest, "Is there a single festival where I don't have to attend?" He replied gently, "All things sacred require your presence. You are sacred, so you must always be present." You gave a dry chuckle, gazed at the sunset, and whispered, "Then is there any festival where gods are allowed to take a nap?" If you think being Pharaoh means only dealing with affairs of state, like managing the Nile's flood season, commissioning new temples, or deciding whether war looms on the southern frontier, you'd be right, but only halfway. Because there's one duty no one warns you about: answering mail. Every week, hundreds of letters pour in from across Egypt, all addressed to you, and almost everyone begins the same way. To the living embodiment of Ra, eternal light of the Nile's shores, the awakener of the morning sun. What follows? Well, everything. One woman writes asking for relationship advice. "Great Pharaoh, my husband spends all day in the fields and barely speaks. Should I switch to selling onions near the market to bring joy to the home?" Another complains about her neighbor. "O mighty one, the house next door sings through the night. Even the gods might sleep through it, but I cannot. Please intervene." And then there are love poems. Yes, poems. If your eyes are the Nile, then my heart is a small boat adrift in endless feeling. You read it and blush. At first you thought, surely this is ceremonial, for fun. But no, there's a whole department just for sorting, transcribing, and drafting replies for your review. You skim a few responses. One letter about the noisy neighbor is answered like this: "Ra shines on all things, but he shines by day. Let night belong to silence. If the song must be sung, let it sing at sunset." You blink. "I said that?" The scribe bows and whispers, We try to keep the divine tone, Your Majesty, but also practical. You chuckle. Practical isn't a word that fits anywhere in your life. Sometimes, though, you write a reply yourself. Like that time a 10-year-old boy sent a letter with just one line. Pharaoh, are you ever afraid? You stared at the page, and your heart softened. You wanted to write, yes. I'm afraid of being misunderstood, of waking up and not recognizing myself, of tripping in front of 40 priests while walking across the courtyard. But you kept it simple. Even Ra needs the night to rest. Fear doesn't make us weak. It reminds us we're alive. Short, but true. Later you heard the boy had pinned your reply to his wall and read it every night before bed. You sat in silence, unsure whether to feel proud or heavy. Because by now you knew you weren't just Pharaoh. You were someone people wrote to, with all their hopes, their loves, dried up wells, and fears for daughters marrying far away. You weren't entirely a person anymore. You were the one you write letters to. Some weeks you were too tired to face another scroll. But then someone would knock gently, holding a papyrus roll from a distant village. She's waited through 4 rainy seasons for a reply, Your Majesty. She hopes you'll write back before the next storm comes. You sigh, sit down, and write. No divine titles, no sacred formalities. Just, I read your words. I'm thinking of you. I hope the winds turn soon and bring you strength. Brief, human. And among the scrolls full of holy and ceremonial phrases, those simple replies make you feel like yourself again. And at night, as the ink dries on palm fiber scrolls, you lie still, the scent of red ink on your fingertips. And you wonder, tomorrow, how many people will come to me with questions? I still don't have answers for myself. You know, there's something no one warns you about when you become Pharaoh. You have far too many statues. Limestone statues, gold statues, greenstone statues, and statues carved from ebony wood. Some towering taller than temple columns. Some are small enough to sit on a desk. Some were placed in sacred temples. Some are placed in marketplaces. And yes, some are even sitting inside the bathroom. All of them. Statues of you. And here's the kicker. You must approve every single one, or by someone acting in your divine essence. At first, it was exciting. Who wouldn't enjoy being immortalized in stone? You'd smile and say things like, make my arm akimbo, adds authority, or let my face look serious, but still approachable. But soon you learn, it's not that simple. Every statue must follow 72 official royal guidelines. The curve of your lips, the openness of your eyes, the precise tilt of your chin. Smile too wide. It's lacking divine serenity. Frown too deeply. It implies wrath unbefitting the dawn light of Ra. Once you reviewed a new statue unveiled at the Southern Temple. Looked fine, at first glance. Then a solemn priest leaned in and whispered, Your Majesty. The mouth curves slightly left. People may think you're smirking. You blinked. Even statues can't smirk. The statue was removed. You were given 18 new sketches to review, each differing only in the angle of the left eyebrow. And that's just for one statue. Statues also had to match specific functions. 1. Standing pose, temple inaugurations. 2. Cross-legged, library entrances. 3rd, holding wheat, granary decoration. 4th, stern face looking downward, ritual courtrooms. You once asked, do we have a statue of me? Just relaxing. All the priests stared at you, horrified. Relaxation is not a public image, Your Majesty. One day, in secret, you approached an elderly sculptor. You asked him to make you a small, private statue. No posture of command, no stern gaze, just you, sitting with knees tucked in, chin resting on your arms. A human posture. The sculptor nodded, quietly. A week later, he brought it to you. A humble clay figure, pensive, simple, not divine, not fearsome, just you. You keep it hidden, tucked in your private chamber. No one knows it exists. but it's the only statue you've ever truly seen yourself in. Every other one, there was a version of you that never really was. Sometimes you pass the grand hallway lined with marble pharaohs, all identical, eyes forward, lips firm, shoulders squared. To the people, they radiate power. To you, it looks like a row of you, turned to stone. You squint, tilt your head, the statues don't blink. You chuckle, and think, I wonder if anyone would dare sculpt me, scratching my head. But you walk on. No one answers, only those stony gazes follow you down the corridor, reflections of your divine self, versions of a legacy that in truth you never fully chose. As Pharaoh, your life isn't just about palaces, councils with high priests, or watching dancers every evening. You also live inside signs. Everything that happens around you, whether it's a heron flying past your window or a leaf falling directly into your morning porridge, might be an omen, and your sacred duty to interpret it all in the most divine way possible. One day, you're taking a quiet stroll in the palace garden when a breeze lifts your cloak off your shoulder. You casually reach to grab it, but before your fingers even touch the fabric, 3 priests emerge from the bushes like they've been monitoring the wind. One drops to his knees and cries, "A northwesterly breeze, a greeting from the god Amun." "Good news is upon you, your majesty." You blink. Before you can ask, "Good news about what?" The second priest chimes in, "Or perhaps it's a sign to shift this year's agricultural strategy." The third furrows his brow. Maybe it symbolizes inner transformation. The cloak, representing authority, flies away, only to return. You stand there, holding your cloak, desperately trying not to laugh. You start to notice every wind, every raindrop, every odd sound is dissected like divine poetry. That very morning, while eating bean porridge, you hear a dog barking in the courtyard. A tense priest enters and declares, "A dog's bark before the sun rises. It foretells disarray among the kingdom's leaders." You pause mid-spoonful, then mumble, "What if the dog just saw a cat?" Dead silence, until one whispers gravely, "A cat, the symbol of Bastet, perhaps a clash between order and emotion." You nod slowly, and continue eating, now cold porridge. Every council's meetings begin with a weekly omen report, like the morning news. "Your Majesty," a priest reads, "this week we've witnessed 5 crows crossing the sun diagonally, incense smoke curling backward thrice, and a full moon obscured for 6 breaths." By omen number 4, your brain drifts into fog. Once, during a land dispute hearing, you sneezed 3 times in a row. Instantly, a priest cried out, 3 sneezes, a triplet omen. We must pause the proceedings and invoke the wisdom of Thoth. In truth, your nose just reacted to dust. But try telling that to a room full of people who believe every speck of dust is God-sent. You tried to rebel once. During a temple ceremony, when wind gusted suddenly, you casually remarked, "Ah, must be a seasonal shift." The crowd froze. A priest bowed low and whispered, "Your Majesty, such jokes must never be spoken." Later that day, an emergency council was called to decode the pharaoh's nonchalance toward the divine winds. From then on, you gave in. Wind, a sign to open the heart. Rain, a message from the Nile. The sun is peeking out just as you stretch. The heavens affirm Pharaoh's awareness. You live in a world where everything, wind, light, shadows, even a falling leaf, it can be a divine message. And you, as Pharaoh, must always understand it. Even if, deep down, you're sighing to yourself, "Dear gods, if you've got something to say, could you just write it down next time?" As Pharaoh, you sit upon the throne. Sounds powerful, regal, commanding, divine. But the truth is, your throne is a beautifully disguised punishment. The Egyptian throne isn't a comfy chair for relaxing after a long day. No cushions, no footrest, and no wheels to roll you anywhere. It's a block of intricate, ornately carved wood, inlaid with gold so heavy it takes 4 people to move it. And you must sit on it, every morning, every ceremony, every council session. But you can't just sit wherever you want. There are rules, precise, exhausting rules. Your back must be straight, heels flat on the ground, right hand gripping the scepter, left hand resting gently on your thigh, head tilted slightly, enough to show divine humility, but not so much that you lose that cosmic authority. You once tried to slightly shift your posture, cross one foot over the other for relief. Immediately, the priest of postural divinity frowned and whispered, "Your Majesty, you are unintentionally signaling doubt in the celestial mandate." You froze, bit your lip, and nodded in submission. From then on, you sat still as stone for 3 hours each morning. There were days you couldn't feel your feet anymore. Once, you stood up and stumbled. The crowd gasped. The Pharaoh has just absorbed a divine surge of energy. No one knew your legs had gone numb. And the throne, it needs maintenance. A specialized team polishes and recharges its sacred aura every month. They burn incense around it, chant blessings, and clean every inch with Nile water mixed with pomegranate juice and powdered gold. Sometimes you've just settled into your seat when they inform you, "Your Majesty, we kindly ask you to stand a moment. The throne's energy needs recalibrating." So you step aside, awkwardly standing in the room like a misplaced decoration, waiting to be repositioned. One day you were exhausted. All you wanted was to sit in a simple chair, with a cushion, maybe even a backrest, and read. You pointed to a rattan chair in storage. "Bring me that one," you said softly. Within the hour, an emergency council was summoned. The issue: the Pharaoh has requested to sit on a chair not recognized in the official canon of divine furniture. This may alter the symbolic identity of the gods. You stood quietly, still without a chair, as they debated. Eventually they agreed to bring the rattan chair, but only if it was covered with a ceremonial cloth embroidered with Horus's symbol, and only for 20 minutes. Under supervision, you sat down, software supportive, silent. You leaned back and closed your eyes. Not 5 minutes later, a priest crept up and whispered, "Your Majesty, perhaps don't tilt your head too far. The court artist is sketching and worries you may appear insufficiently divine." You opened your eyes, exhaled slowly. As Pharaoh, you don't get to choose how you sit. Even your chair, the most mundane object in most lives, it is a symbol, a ritual, a cog in the endless celestial machinery. And you are both the king and the display piece. And sometimes, deep in your mind, you nurture a straightforward wish: to sit cross-legged under a tree, lean back against its bark, and take one long sip of cold water, without anyone chanting in the background. As Pharaoh, you have an entire team dedicated to your hair. Sounds luxurious, but in truth, it's a royal pain. Every single strand, real or fake, must conform to the sacred standards of divine grooming. First rule: you're not allowed to grow your hair naturally. That's forbidden. From a young age, your head is shaved regularly to maintain purity. Every 3 days, someone enters your chamber holding a gleaming bronze razor, bows low and whispers, "Your Majesty, it is time to renew the cleansing cycle." You sit still, sighing, not because it hurts, but because it itches. Once your head is smooth again, they place a wig upon you, the finest kind made from real human hair, sometimes blended with soft goat wool and a few golden threads. But it's heavy, heavier than you expected. Some days you wear it for 12 straight hours during ceremonies. By evening, when it's finally removed, your forehead bears a red dent, like you've worn a bronze helmet all day. One day you casually request, "I'd like a simpler hairstyle, something lighter, maybe soft Nubian curls." Silence. The room freezes. A trembling priest responds, "Your Majesty, the Pharaoh's hairstyle was chosen by the gods centuries ago. Any deviation may cause spiritual disarray across the delta." You squint. A change in hairstyle might disrupt the Nile River. No one dares reply. Once, on a whim, you quietly summon a personal attendant and whisper, "Make me a new style, just between us." The poor man sweats. "If your Majesty is discovered, I may be buried alive, alongside the wig." You feel awful. You abandon the idea. You stare at your reflection and murmur, "So I don't even have the right to have messy hair." On special holidays, it gets even worse. Your ceremonial wig is braided into dozens of tiny plaits, studded with gemstones, gold beads, and sometimes divine feathers. You stare at yourself in the mirror, your head now 3 times its standard size, your neck strained to hold it up. Even smiling is a challenge, because when you smile, your hair wiggles. And wiggle wigs are sacrilegious. And then there's summer. You sit on the throne at noon, under the blistering sun, wearing a thick wig that steams like a clay oven. Sweat runs down your neck. You want to scratch, but you can't. You must sit, still, smile gently. It is as if basking in sunlight, not roasting under it. You once dreamed, just dreamed, of a holiday where you could appear bald, nothing on your head, just you, your real scalp. No ceremony, no styling, no gold threads, no ancestral expectations, just you. But then you wake up, and that morning, like every other, a servant enters, bows and says, "Your Majesty, it is time to choose your wig for the day. The first week ceremonial model, the blessing-bestowing model, or the one reserved for citizen grievances." You sigh. Point to the lightest one. Because either way, you have to wear it. You'd think that being Pharaoh means eating the finest foods in Egypt. Well, yes. But not really. Because you don't get to choose what you eat. You don't plan your daily meals. The Council of Offerings dictates them. They follow a sacred culinary calendar, which dish goes on which day, what foods must be avoided during a waning moon, and which ingredients are only allowed when the Nile is receding. For example, Mondays are dedicated to the god Thoth, which means you must eat steamed river fish and green beans, served with date juice, no salt, no spice, absolutely no onions. Tuesdays are for solar energy circulation. Translation: wheat porridge with honey and a few slices of pickled lotus root. Sounds poetic. Tastes like hand soap. Once you asked politely, "Could I get something just a little salty?" Still porridge, just with a pinch of salt. A priest immediately shook his head. Excess salt dishonors Sobek, guardian of underground waters. If your Majesty eats salty food, the rains may cease. You blinked. A sprinkle of salt might ruin the weather. One day you're served a banquet table 3 meters long. Over 30 dishes are presented, but you can only see most of them. They're symbolic offerings to the divine. You ask, "Can I eat any of this?" A servant replies, "Yes, Your Majesty, the 3 main dishes at the center. But they must be eaten in sequence and not rearranged. The first is a square block of bean paste. The second is a round block of bean paste. The third, a pyramid-shaped block of," you guessed it, bean paste. You look around and wonder silently, has anyone in this palace ever tried fish stew? Meals never begin without the sacred ritual of dish interpretation. One priest stands up and reads aloud the name of each food, its symbolic meaning, and the accompanying incantation. This is honey cake, symbolizing the sweetness of your reign. This is grape juice, representing the smooth flow of foreign diplomacy. This is roasted yam, evoking inner stability. By this point, you'd rather eat a sweet potato and call it a day. One time, you accidentally ate a raisin meant for next week's sun god ritual. The room froze. A high priest turned pale and trembled. "Your Majesty, please spit it out. That raisin is part of the Thursday sun offering. Consuming it now will disrupt the ceremonial cycle." You just sat there, chewed, because halfway spitting a raisin felt even more ridiculous. That evening, you were made to perform a cleansing of the palate ritual, drinking 3 cups of bitter lotus tea with no sugar to purify your divine taste energies. Sometimes you want to eat something simple, a bowl of hot soup, a warm loaf of bread, a fresh, juicy pomegranate. No ritual, no symbolism, no planetary alignment. But you're Pharaoh. You eat to represent peace. You chew for the nation. You swallow to maintain the balance of the Nile. Being Pharaoh means you're watched while eating, holding court, or stepping into your royal litter. And even while you sleep, not in the someone's watching you breathe way, more like you're subjected to a full dream analysis panel every morning. It was like your dreams were in the stock market and someone needed a report. They call it the sacred dream decoding of His Majesty. Before you even sip your first warm drink of the day, a group of priests is already waiting by your bedroom door, wax tablets in hand, faces deadly serious. Your Majesty, please recount what you dreamed. Some mornings, you're still groggy and just mutter, I was rowing a boat. Ducks everywhere. One duck had a hat. Scribble, scribble, scribble. One priest chimes in, rowing represents inner transition. Ducks symbolize flexibility. The one with the hat may foretell the arrival of a foreign dignitary. You're still trying to remember if it was a dream or real, and they're already handing you a 12-line prophecy. Over time, you realize something. Every dream can be turned into a divine message, falling into a pit, a reminder to practice humility in the face of trials, flying into the sky, balance your instincts with your rational mind, naked in a market, an omen of purging arrogance, even though you're sure that dream was caused by too much bean paste. One morning, you wake up and say, last night I slept like a rock, no dreams. The priests murmur, a white dream, a sign that clarity is on the horizon. You blink. No dream is also a sign. The priest nods solemnly. In silence, the universe speaks its deepest truths. One night you're truly exhausted, and you dream that you're sleeping. That's it, just lying peacefully. No boats, no snakes, no gods. No one is watching, just you, breathing. In the morning, you report it. The priesthood debates for an hour. Finally, the head priest declares, this is rare, symbolic of the Pharaoh reaching the deepest layer of inner harmony. A sacred alignment. Congratulations. You smirk. Or maybe, I was just very tired. No one laughs. They document your words, stamp the tablet, and retreat. Even in your jokes, every word from the Pharaoh has a cosmic meaning. One day you gently ask, could I just sleep without anyone recording my dreams? They sigh in unison. Your Majesty's dreams bridge this world and the divine. If you dream, the stars themselves are listening. You go quiet. That night you dream you're dreaming, that you're not Pharaoh, just a person sleeping beneath a tree. No witnesses, no scribes, only the sound of soft wind. And in the morning, you say nothing. You smile, sip your water, and whisper, the breeze was nice last night. Being Pharaoh doesn't just mean ruling the kingdom. It means being the main character in nearly every folktale, bedtime story, moral lesson, and traveling poem ever told in your land. Sounds flattering. But have you ever had to sit through hours of people chanting about you? One quiet afternoon, you visit a temple school for the children of priests. A symbolic visit. Everyone knows that. But the moment you step through the door, the entire room stands, and the children chant in unison, Pharaoh is the radiant sun, the one who split the darkness to bring light to the people. You freeze mid-step. One wide-eyed child tugs your robe and whispers, my lord, did you really turn a crocodile into a bridge once? You open your mouth, close it again, because honestly, you have no memory of doing that. Every year, scholars invent new legends about you, no permission needed. They write, inspired by divine dreams or vague omens, someone's uncle had a vision last winter. One story claims you summoned rain by whistling 3 times. Another says you turned the moon red to propose to a northern princess. Another, you transformed into a black cat to sneak into a traitor's home. You clearly remember the last time you whistled. It was to ask for another towel. During festival seasons, traveling storytellers flood the markets, spinning hundreds of dramatic tales about you. You can't stop them. You once tried, could we please stop saying I can shapeshift? I can't even open a stubborn jar. A priest smiled and said, Your Majesty doesn't need to believe it. The people need to. And belief doesn't require logic. So you sit through performances with folk songs like Pharaoh threw a stick, the stick became a dragon. The dragon laughed, And it rained on the wagon. You sigh. That stick's only ever been used to tap the ground during ceremonies. The worst part? Every major holiday comes with a stage play performed in front of the palace. You sit for hours watching your life story, acted out by someone wearing a gaudy robe, booming lines like they're shouting across the Nile. You must sit still, no frowning, no shaking your head, no snorting when you dramatically step on your robe and declare, "I am the blazing sun, I bring life to the earth." You nod, slowly, while the crowd claps like they're at a rock concert. One day, while sipping tea, your servant quietly asks, "My lord, did you really fly on a lion's back once?" You nearly choke. "Number, I can't even ride a camel without help." The servant nods. "I thought so. But my mother told me that when I was little." You smile gently. If your mother told you, keep it. Believe it. Just don't pass it on. Because truthfully, all you want, it's just one story that doesn't include you. A story about someone ordinary, no gods, no magic, no throne, just a person walking across a stretch of warm sand, listening to the breeze rustle the palms, smiling because, for once, no one knows their name. Being Pharaoh, you are the center of the world. Everyone watches you, everyone talks about you, and because of that, you never truly have time for yourself. Not in the sense of too busy to rest. No, you are not allowed to be alone. From the moment you open your eyes each morning, at least 5 attendants are already waiting by your bedside. One with a towel, one with water, one to record what you said in your dreams, one to prepare ceremonial items, and one who stands there to ensure the peaceful awakening of His Majesty's spirit. You once joked, "If I yawn in my sleep, does someone write that down too?" The attendant answered solemnly, "Yes, Your Majesty. If you yawn during a sacred hour, it may be an important sign." You fell silent. Even when you go for a walk, you're never alone. A team of guards follows behind, 2 priests walk beside you to interpret signs along the path, and 3 others hold parasols to block the sun, even though you want to feel a bit of sunshine. You tried to slip away once, turning suddenly onto a small garden path. 3 minutes later, they caught up. A panting guard said, "Your Majesty, you must not move without warning. If you were to stub your toe, it could signal cosmic imbalance." You only wanted to find a quiet spot and listen to the wind. Even the royal bath, supposedly the last private place, is never truly yours. The royal bathhouse has 3 entrances, each guarded. Inside are people preparing water, lighting incense, timing your bath, and one whose only job is to maintain ritual purity while Pharaoh purifies his body. Once you requested, "Give me 5 minutes, just 5 minutes, alone." An attendant bowed and said, "Yes, Your Majesty. We shall step outside, but we will remain behind the silk curtain to ensure no strange winds disturb your spiritual balance." You sighed. Through the thin curtain, you could still clearly see their silhouettes. Another time, you stayed up late, hoping that you could slip out alone once everyone was tired. You tiptoed down the hallway. The moon was bright. The sand sparkled. You smiled, but before you could take 10 steps, a voice emerged from the shadows. "Forgive me, Your Majesty. Please return to your chambers. It is not permitted to roam unguarded at this hour." You stepped back, smiled weakly. "So, someone even guards your sleep." You started to wonder, has anyone ever truly met themselves, if they've never once been alone? You live among people, among rituals, among the eyes. But within you there's a tiny hollow space, just large enough to hold one quiet question each night. They see me, but does anyone know me? And as with every night, there is no answer. Only a distant ceremonial drum's soft beat signals the next ritual. And once again, you rise, step forward, and return to your role. The Pharaoh, surrounded by 100 people, yet not a single space to call your own. Being Pharaoh, even laughing couldn't come naturally. It wasn't that you didn't like to laugh. On the contrary, you wanted to, especially when something was genuinely funny. But the problem was, you were only allowed to laugh, according to the regulations. Every type of smile carried a specific meaning. A closed-mouth smile, a symbol of divine compassion, a slight open-mouthed smile, a sign of deep benevolence, showing your teeth, undignified, unworthy of royal character. So from a young age, you were trained to smile, ceremonially. You even had a facial expression instructor. He would arrive with a mirror every morning and say, "Your Majesty, please rehearse smile number 3 today," the one for greeting foreign envoys without seeming too friendly. You sat upright, stared into the mirror, and practiced smiling at exactly a 15-degree angle. One day, a dancer slipped and flipped upside down during a ceremonial dance rehearsal. The entire room froze. You nearly burst out laughing. You instinctively raised your hand to cover your mouth, a purely human reflex. But immediately, a high priest approached and whispered, "Your Majesty, please do not cover your mouth when laughing. It suggests you're hiding emotions and may unsettle the people." You nodded, face flushing red, then quickly adjusted, lips pressed together, a soft smile, as if you were empathizing with the universe, not laughing at someone falling over. Even when you were alone, or thought you were, someone would come to check if you laughed too loudly. Once, you were reading an old tablet with clumsy poetry that made you chuckle. Moments later, a knock on the door. A guard spoke softly, "Apologies, Your Majesty. I heard something, and was concerned something unusual had occurred." You sighed. "No, I was just laughing." He nodded, then backed away, but not before noting the time and estimated volume of the laughter. During major festivals, in historical stage plays, there was always a scene where Pharaoh had to laugh heartily to show joy toward the people. You'd sit watching an actor play you, laughing uncontrollably in the middle of the crowd, laughing so hard his robe shook, slapping his thigh. The crowd roared in applause. You just sat still, because if you laughed too, they'd write, "The Pharaoh has confirmed the accuracy of this legend." Once, you genuinely laughed. A child offered you a tiny beetle made of rice cake, adorably crafted. You chuckled briefly, but it was real. The court officials bowed instantly. The Pharaoh has sent a sign of great fortune. The people must prepare offerings. The child turned pale, thinking he'd made a grave mistake for making the king laugh at the wrong time. You bent down, gently patted his head. "I laughed because you're clever. Don't be afraid." But you knew, even that laugh would soon be recorded as a divine omen. Sometimes you wondered if you ever laughed honestly, a laugh with no one to record it, no one to define it, no rituals behind it. Then perhaps, at that moment, you wouldn't be Pharaoh anymore. You'd be a person, tired. I want to live like anyone else, just for a little while. Being Pharaoh meant sitting in the front row at every ceremony, big or small, across the kingdom. Sounds prestigious. But the truth, you couldn't skip a single one, even if it were the 42nd time you'd watched a cow get bathed in camel milk and sprinkled with rosewater while monks chanted in unison. There were about 250 major ceremonies yearly, not counting the dozens of supplementary rituals. Each one lasted anywhere from 2 hours to 2 full days. You once joked, "What if I'm not available?" The priests all replied in perfect harmony, "Then we shall delay the ceremony until Your Majesty returns." And they meant it. Once you had a headache and skipped a session. The golden fire god offering was postponed for 3 days. The whole village waited. The sacred fire died out. The incense ran low. And you still had to sit through the entire ritual from the beginning. One of your favorite events was the changing of the seasons ceremony. It had 6 segments: chants for wind and rain, circular dancing, colored sand sprinkling, symbolic wheat flour sacrifices, and finally, watching the sunrise in silence for 90 minutes. You sat there, eyes open, while your mind floated away like a grounded boat. You once dared to close your eyes for a moment. A priest immediately approached and whispered, "Please keep your eyes open, Your Majesty. The sun requires your gaze to begin the new season." You weren't sure if your stare worked like cosmic sunscreen. Some rituals were so strange you didn't even know how to respond. Take, for example, the ceremony of listening to the earth sing, where priests press their ears to the sand to hear the earth's whispers. You, too, were invited to lie down and listen. You did, for quite a while, and all you heard was your stomach grumbling softly. You asked, "If I hear that, does it mean the earth is hungry?" No one laughed, only the royal scribe quietly recorded, "His Majesty has tuned into the primal voice of the earth." One ceremony lasted 3 days. The transmission of sound from the star Canopus. Night 1. Listen to the recitation of 2,000 star names. Night 2. Interpret a priest's dream involving a fish. Final night. Wait for Canopus to rise on the horizon. You whispered, "What if it's cloudy?" They answered, "Then your Majesty must wait until next year." You silently wondered, could I just read a summary? But summaries were sacrilege. You had to sit fully, quietly, smiling on cue, nodding appropriately. Even when the ceremony happened on a day when you only wanted to lie down and put your feet up, you were still there, surrounded by drum beats, burning incense, and people tossing golden paper petals onto your head like they were trying to summon rain. That's when it hit you. As Pharaoh, there were no weekends, no holidays, no such thing as skipping an event. You were the one person in the kingdom who couldn't be bored. But sometimes, as you sat among hundreds of followers, with the sunlight flickering through a haze of fragrant smoke, you'd spot a tiny bird landing on a wooden railing. It tilted its head curiously at you. It didn't care who you were. It didn't ask for a ritual. It didn't chant your name. It just perched there, hopped once or twice, then flew away. And you'd watch it go, thinking, "I wish I could be that bird, just for one day." Being Pharaoh meant you weren't just the ruler of the present, you were the blueprint for centuries to come. Which meant you weren't allowed to forget anything. Names, dates, rituals, blessings. You had to remember it all. Once you asked, "What if I forget something?" A priest replied instantly, without hesitation, "If your Majesty forgets, future generations may misinterpret divine signals. History could unravel. The stars may lose their alignment." You thought for a second. "Even if I forget the name of the dessert I had yesterday?" He nodded. Every detail carries cosmic weight. Each morning, you were required to review the divine log, a scroll nearly as tall as you, documenting the previous day's events. Who gave you what blessing, how many times you smiled, what you ate, who offered gifts, and whether the offerings were arranged in the correct order. And of course, you had to memorize it all, to demonstrate the Pharaoh's spiritual consistency across time. Once, you called a priest by the wrong name. He still smiled politely, but you noticed that he didn't stand near you the next day. Someone gently reminded you 3 days later, "Your Majesty may wish to send blessings to High Priest Imeni, whose name was momentarily forgotten last week." You wrote a message, adding, "May he be as strong as the Nile in flood season." That sentence was recorded, carved into stone, and transformed into the year's official temple chant by a team of poets. One sentence, all because you forgot a name. And just like that, it became legend. You weren't allowed to forget the gods either. There were at least 1,400 major and minor deities in the pantheon. And you were expected to remember as many as possible. Names, symbols, offerings, pronunciation. Once, you mispronounced the name of a local goddess during an incense ceremony. You said Sekhmet instead of Sekhet. A small slip, right? The result, the villagers burned incense non-stop for 3 extra days to untangle divine frequencies. You had to write an apology, then send a delegation to clarify your Majesty's true intent. You once suggested, "Can I use a small notebook?" The priests exchanged glances, then replied, "Your Majesty may use one during private hours. But in public, you must display the all-knowing mind of the God-chosen sovereign." You weren't sure if you were chosen by the gods or trapped by them. Worse than forgetting was remembering incorrectly. You recited the wrong year by 1 during a ceremony commemorating an ancient victory. Immediately, someone stood up and said, "May His Majesty kindly verify the date." That year, according to the lunar divine calendar, there was a brief solar eclipse. Adjustments are necessary. You nodded, trying not to reveal the fatigue pooling behind your eyes. You wanted to forget. Just for a bit. Just for once. Forget the names. Forget the rituals. Forget the watching eyes. Forget the role, the duty, the destiny, the divinity, and the stars. You wanted to forget, so you could remember yourself, and just for a moment, be a person. Not perfect, not all-knowing, not immortal, just someone breathing, quietly, freely, for once. Being Pharaoh meant you were the living embodiment of a god. But when you died, you weren't allowed to rest like an ordinary soul. Your death became an event that lasted longer than your life. Even while you were perfectly healthy, preparations for your funeral were already underway. One sunny afternoon, you were nibbling on a barley cake when the royal architect bowed before you and said, "Your Majesty, the blueprint for the northern corridor of your tomb is ready. Kindly approve." You almost choked. Which tomb? The eternal tomb of your Majesty, version 37. Adjusted per your last suggestion, more lotus flowers on the ceiling. You nodded, not remembering ever making that note, but you couldn't say no. Since you were 15, over 200 artisans had been hired to build your tomb. They worked year-round, carving stone, painting walls, chiseling blessings. While you still lived, your tomb was 3 times longer than any commoner's house. Each time you coughed, someone would scurry off to update the prayer scrolls of transition. Want a peaceful death? Sorry, not an option. When you died, the nation entered transition mode for 70 days. All music ceased, all ceremonies were renamed, every statue was turned to face your tomb. 70 days to embalm you, and it wasn't simple. Your brain was removed through your nose with a hooked instrument. Your liver was extracted, your heart dried, your lungs cured. All done with the utmost reverence. The embalmers had to memorize incantations because every organ had its guardian deity. You had no say in how you died. Even if you collapsed in a garden or passed peacefully in bed, the official version would always be, "The Pharaoh ascended to the heavens, summoned by divine command." You once joked, "What if I died from eating spoiled shrimp?" A priest frowned. Then it will be written, "He tasted the fragility of cosmic order." Even your name wasn't yours after death. New titles were added: Son of the Sun, Opener of the Stargates, Guide through the Duat. Your real name was sealed to prevent your spirit from being miscalled on the path. And you weren't buried once. You were buried in layers. The outermost was gold, then rare wood, then perfumed linen, then you. Someone once asked, "Is it really necessary to have 17 coffins?" The answer, the more layers, the warmer the soul. Even after burial, you weren't left alone. Annual festivals reenact your memory. Statues of you were paraded so you could see the river, hear music, and receive symbolic offerings. You weren't allowed a quiet death, no fading gently, no slipping away into a private, restful somewhere. You had to remain present, even when you were no longer here. And years later, when your tomb was robbed, your statue broken, your name misspelled on a fading shrine, people would argue, did Pharaoh truly die like that? Maybe he ascended and became a god. Or is he still watching us? And you, if any part of you still lingered, would only want to whisper, "Let me sleep, just once. No more rituals, no more poems. I'm tired." Your death is over. The ceremonies are done. The statues are raised, the body embalmed, and the hymns are carved into stone. But you haven't gone anywhere. Because a pharaoh is not allowed to disappear. Unlike ordinary people who can be forgotten with time, you are preserved forever. Your name is etched into pillars, tomb walls, necklaces, grain jars, even on stone nail files. Everywhere. You live again each day, through the priest's chants, the temple murals, the children's lessons. Our Pharaoh once. You may have once wished to rest, to step off the stage of life's endless play. But no, they kept you as a role that never ends. Every statue, every carving of you sitting upright, head high, gaze fixed on the horizon, that's you. But not the real you. No one carved you yawning. No one painted you sighing. No one told you how you once tripped over your robe. They preserved a version so flawless it became lifeless. And then, a few centuries later, a new pharaoh rises. Your statue is pushed aside. Your temple falls silent. Your name might even be scratched away. To unify the divine order, you are no longer the embodiment of the gods. You are just a name on a wall, a school chapter, a fading mark in human memory. Still, it's not over. Thousands of years later, a stranger from another land unearths your broken statue. They brush off the dust, squinting. What's this say? Who was this? You were once light and law and belief. Now you are an interesting archaeological find. They place you in a museum. They label you unidentified stone statue, possibly Pharaoh Amenhotep the something. You stand there, sealed in a glass box under cold white lights, watched by curious faces. No one knows that you once just wanted to take a quiet walk, to laugh freely, to eat soup without a ceremony, to forget just for a moment. No one knows that once, in the silence of the night, you whispered, "I am king, but I am also human. Let me be still, just once." And maybe, in some quiet moment, a museum visitor smiles gently, looks at your statue and whispers, "You look kind of tired." And you, though only stone, though long gone, hear it. A tiny human truth, but it's real. And so, all the splendor has faded. No more drums pounding, no more endless festivals. No more chants, no more priests waiting by your bedside. No one is recording your dreams. No one is calling your name as a symbol of divine order. There is only you. You are no longer Pharaoh, no longer king, no longer any of the titles carved into tomb walls or broken statues. Only a soul remains, light as mist, standing on an empty stretch of sand. No voices, no rituals, no eyes watching. And you, for the first time, are free to walk. You step into the calm waters of the Nile. No one stops you. No one says, "Your Majesty, that isn't ceremonial protocol." You smile, a real smile, no scribe to record it, no nod of approval required. You walk past rustling palms, past the soft chirps of summer crickets, past the statue that once stood before thousands, past the temple where they once spoke your name as if calling to a god. And you realize you never lived a single day, as simply yourself. But now, in this quiet space, you are beginning to. No crown, no power, no duty, no watching eyes, just a human wanting to sit and breathe in silence. And so you do. You sit. You close your eyes. And in that small moment, drifting through a nameless realm, you finally find what you've searched for your whole life. Peace. Not the peace of a pharaoh, but the peace of simply being. Thank you for staying with me to the end of this journey. Truly, if you still hear these words, you've walked with me through over 30 nights, 30 quiet afternoons, or maybe just one long, winding path into sleep. Together, we've followed the footsteps of a pharaoh, someone who seemed to hold all the power in the world, yet lived in loneliness, constraint, and beneath the heavy shell of a symbol. After this story, I hope you'll see one thing clearly. Even those at the highest peaks carry the simplest wishes, to breathe freely, be themselves, and smile without fear of being recorded. And if there's a pharaoh inside you, the part that always has to hold it together, always has to be right, always has to be strong, maybe give that part a little peace and gentleness, so that you can rest, so that you can smile softly, so that you can forget, without guilt. If this journey meant something to you, please like the video, subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment telling me where you're listening from and what time it is for you. I genuinely love reading those. It makes me feel like you're right here with me, even if we're thousands of miles apart. I'll see you on the next sleepy journey.